Hey everybody, welcome to Alaskan Reactions. Here today with me. Sure you saw the thumbnail. I don't even know what I'm going to write on that yet. I don't even know if I'm going to do a video today or I'm just going to talk. We'll see. Obviously, today was an incredibly sad day for the hard rock and metal community in general, um, as well as some of us who, consider themselves huge Ozzy fans. I mean, if you've watched every video on this channel, then I've talked about it a little bit, especially when I've shown some Ozzy videos to some people like Angie and Joe and a few others. But I am 51 years old. I first started listening to Ozzy when I was 12, and it literally changed my entire life and trajectory of music. I listened to 80s pop music, Huey Lewis and the News, Cyndi Lauper, stuff like that. And then I spent the night at my friend's house, still one of my best friends to this day. Shout out to Forrest and his older brother Cotton. Um, had recorded a bunch of videos off of MTV on a VHS tape back in the day. And he played the Shot in the Dark video from Ozzy. And I'm not kidding when I say it changed my entire life. The next day, I went home back when we had the dual cassette players with a recording tape with Diary of a Madman on one side of it and Speak of the Devil on the other side. And then within a week, I used my allowance and went and bought Blizzard of Oz. Um, and then I got The Ultimate Sin and Bark at the Moon a couple weeks later, and I was in to win. And then Tribute came out the next year, and then of course No Rest for the Wicked and No More Tears and Osmosis and Live and Loud in between there, and of course the Ozzy Live EP Just Say Ozzy as well came out. Lots of stuff along the way, and I read every article in Hit Parader magazine and Circus magazine and everything I could find at the store. I of course had the Ultimate Ozzy live video tape that came out during the Ultimate Sin tour, or right after the Ultimate Sin tour that was filmed in Kansas City. Um, I had the Don't Blame Me videotape and watched it almost every day when I came home from school. Of course, got Live and Loud, watched that all the time when I was in college, and was lucky enough that I got to meet him when I was just turned 18 years old. He came. I had convinced my parents. I live in Alaska, as we know, Alaskan Reactions. I convinced my parents to let me go to Denver, where a friend of mine had moved to in November of 1991, and I saw Ozzy on what was called the Theater of Madness tour, which is a little warm-up tour before he did the full No More Tears, No More Tours, as they called it back then, because he thought he was going to be done touring then. Anyway, so that was the first time I saw him because I convinced my parents he'd never come to Alaska, and then lo and behold, um, 5 months later, he came to Alaska. I found out in February that he'd be coming at the end of March. And my dad worked for United Airlines. And I'm sure what he did was wrong, but he's long gone now. So I asked him to look in the computer back then and say, hey, see if Ozzy was flying on United Airlines. If he would fly between Anchorage and Fairbanks, because he was playing a show in Anchorage and Fairbanks. Told him his real name was John Osbourne, that his personal assistant was a guy named Tony Dennis, so it would be Anthony Dennis. Um, and I came home one day, one of the old dot matrix computer printouts, didn't think anything of it, sitting on the counter because I used to come home to those a lot. Because when you work in the airline industry, especially back then before all the frequent flyer miles and stuff, you flew on a pass all the time. Space available, they called it. So I just saw it sitting on the counter. And I was like, oh, my mom or my sister or my dad or somebody's going somewhere. So the printout of where they're going to be going is there. Anchorage to Chicago to Hartford, Connecticut, where we'd fly into a lot to visit my grandparents who lived in just over the border in Massachusetts. But lo and behold, I glance at it and there's a little note. It says, to Jeremy, happy birthday and Merry Christmas, love, Dad. I'm like, what? And I look on there and I see John Osbourne and Anthony Dennis, Anchorage to Fairbanks, March 29th or March 30th, 1992. Sitting in seats 1A and 1B. And lo and behold, I got to sit in seat 1C right across the aisle in first class from him. Got an autograph. That was he wasn't in the best of shape then, both physically and mentally. They'd had a kind of a Randy Rhoads tribute concert a couple days before in San Bernardino, I believe it was, and he invited the first few rows to join him on stage and sing Goodbye to Romance. And of course, when you invite the first few rows, you have invited every row to join you on stage. And the whole venue got messed up, and Ozzy got a little messed up. And of course, he was self medicating as well back then, so he wasn't in the greatest shape. But he asked me my name. He signed an autograph for me to Jeremy. Best wishes, Ozzy Osbourne. And you know, back then everybody didn't have a camera in their hand, so I didn't actually get a picture with him at the time. Um, but I still have that autograph to this day. I probably should have dug it out before I started to do this video, but I don't really want to go through all the Ozzy memorabilia I have right now because it's just it's a bit emotional. But it was probably the best day of my teenage life. I got to meet what was then, and still can be considered my hero, and it was amazing and it was awesome. And he put on two great shows in Anchorage and Fairbanks. And then, boy, probably about 8 years later, maybe 10 years later, he came back up and did Anchorage and Fairbanks again. Um, and it was 10 years later, a little more than 10 years later. And I was interning at a radio station, and I was not on the meet and greet list, but got backstage. But one of the other radio stations had brought in so many extra people that they were triple checking the list, and I wasn't on it. So even though I knew the girl that was backstage working for the local venue, Ozzy's crew said, "Hey, we're way past the limit of people that were going to be in this meet and greet." So I got sent out of there, and then we got to Fairbanks, and my friends and I snuck backstage with. We had passes from a local bar in Anchorage that had an Ozzy party. And it was a laminate that you hung around your neck like road crew wore, and it had Ozzy's picture on it. So we just said, the hell with it, we're going to walk backstage. And the Fairbanks local security saw Ozzy's picture on it and just waved us backstage. And we were standing next to the stage after the concert was over. I know nowadays lots of meet and greets happen before the show. Back then, a lot of them happened excuse me, after the show. They waved us on backstage. We were standing there. A couple guys from up on the stage asked if we were local crew and helping with the loadout, and we said, "Hell yeah, we are." And we hopped on stage and started stealing everything we could find. At one point, I had Ozzy's entire microphone stand in my hand, but a true road crew member took it from me. But we got Ozzy's towel, we got Mike Borden's drumsticks, we got Ozzy's bottle of Gatorade that he was drinking from. I can't remember what else. But we grabbed everything we could that wasn't bolted down. And then my buddies were like, "Go, look, there's the line." And I went and hopped in the line again for the meet and greet. And the lady that I knew that worked backstage at the Anchorage venue, it was the same ownership group for both venues, was there in Fairbanks, and looked at me and said, "Jeremy, you're not on the list. What are you doing here?" And I said, "Don't I get credit for finding a way back here again?" And she said, "You're going to have to talk to the tour manager." So I went and talked to the tour manager, Bill Greer, and thankfully they had done an article in the newspaper about me being a huge Ozzy fan and having seen Ozzy at that point 28 times or something like that. And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, you're the guy from the newspaper." He's like, "Yeah, you're good. Hop in line." And I got to meet Ozzy and get a picture with Ozzy. And hopefully I will, I think I have it digitally somewhere, so I will try and pop it in here if I can. I will try to remember to do that. Anyway, those are just some of the memories I had with Mr. Osbourne. If you're still watching, I know this is a long video. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be able to talk about it. I was able to go to the Back to the Beginning show. That was wonderful. So many shows over the year. I saw him 54 times in concert, if I didn't say that already. Not as many in the last 10 years or so, because he didn't tour as much at all. Obviously, in the last 5 years, I was lucky enough to go to what were billed as the final Black Sabbath shows when they had the End in Birmingham, England back in 2017 without Bill Ward. I went to those final two shows. And then the next year, just by happenstance, Ozzy did a New Year's Eve show in Los Angeles that I went to. right before he had a fall. He had a fall like a month or so later that really kind of messed him up and started this whole unfortunate downward slope towards this final concert. And then, of course, COVID hit. So it turned into the last Ozzy solo show, which was at the LA Forum. Uh, he did a couple of one-offs in the sense of, he was at a Rams game and played patient number 9, sort of. And then he was, there was a thing in England, same thing. I think it was in Birmingham as well, where he did like one song. But the last full concert he had was New Year's Eve of 2018, 2019 at the Forum. And like I said, I was lucky enough to be at that. And then, of course, went to Back to the Beginning a few weeks ago. So to get that text today, I mean, I got a million texts and phone calls from people, but the initial one that asked me if I was okay and had the praying hands, 2 of them on there, and I immediately said, "Oh no," and went and quickly Google searched Ozzy's name, as I've done in the past. To be fair, many times when people have asked if I'm okay, I think, "Oh no, what's happened to Ozzy?" And unfortunately, this time when I did the search, it was that he's gone, and it was surreal, of course, sad. The thing that luckily kept me going was I was as I've said many times, I'm the technical director for a soccer club and also coach soccer. And one of the things that I do coach is I run our preschool academy. So I was out there with a bunch of 2.5 to 3.5 year olds. And if there's anything to get you out of a bad mood, it's a bunch of 2.5 to 3.5 year old kids running around having the time of their lives, chasing soccer balls and playing fun little spaceship games and games with bubbles and things. And thankfully they helped keep my head on straight. And one of my cohorts that's here a lot with me, Angie, coaches that with me. So she was there as well, which was a nice support to have. And then of course I had lots of friends calling me today, my mom, my sister, and it was just it was nice. It was nice to get that support from people. I was a true fanatic when I was a kid, and that lasted all the way into my to this day. I'm still a huge Ozzy fanatic. That's why I got those tickets and spent the money to go to that final show. Um, and I appreciate all the all the contributions that he and all his bandmates over the years, some that aren't here anymore. Randy Rhoads, of course, Randy Castillo, um, all the contributions they made to hard rock and heavy metal, and they'll never be another Ozzy. He was unique as they come, good or bad. You know, I know he wasn't perfect. There's stuff with Jakey Lee and Blizzard of Oz, whether or not it was supposed to be a band or a solo effort, and many other things with erasing Kerslake and Daisley off the first 2 albums and replacing their drum and bass tracks and things over the years that sure get blamed on Sharon, but Ozzy I'm sure was at least part of it in some way, shape, or form, and it's I'm just glad there was a lot more good than there was bad, and his voice is one of the most unique voices that was ever out there. Um, I've seen many tribute bands of many people out there, Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Kiss, etc. And they always do a really good job, most of those bands. But I have yet to see an Ozzy tribute band that really captured the voice and the sound of Ozzy. He was just so unique. And I miss that guy. I spent the last 39 years listening, and it's not going to stop, but even though that was labeled as the last show, there was still always that hope that, maybe he was going to do a Vegas residency or something, because nobody ever wanted to stop, just like his song, I Don't Want to Stop. And it's hard to take that he stopped. And I feel horrible for his family, for Sharon and Jack and Kelly and Amy, and his two kids with his first wife Thelma, Louie and Jessica. Oh, and his grandchildren. Jack has children, Kelly has a child, and what that family must be going through right now. And all you other fans out there, one of my best friends in the world, Jeff, went to the Back to the Beginning show with me. We met at an Ozzy concert. He lives in Michigan and I live here. He's seen Ozzy. I've seen him 54 times. He saw him over 100, I believe. And all the other big Ozzy fans that we met over the years. Mark, a guy named Mark that lives in Southern California, and his buddy, whose name escapes me right now, but he had long blonde hair, and he always wrote Ozzy right across his forehead, and it was hilarious. Um, and then, Big Dave, who became friends with, it was Ozzy's, loyal sidekick there, helping him for the last 15 years, being his stagehand, getting him whatever he needed during shows to make sure he got through shows. And one of my other best friends now in this world, a guy named Alan Schiff, that was the VIP meet and greet coordinator for Ozzy, and before that they used to have the Party Like a Rock Star. It was called on the Ozfests, and that's where I met Alan, and we became great friends over the years, and I stay at his place whenever I visit Las Vegas, and we hang out together, and hopefully he's working for Foreigner now, and is coming to Alaska later this summer, his 50th state. He'll finally get to the last state, the one he's never been to, so I'm excited for that. And Eddie Webb, that was worked on the Party Like a Rock Star a long time ago, and Tia, wherever she is, another big, huge super fan that we met over the years. And oh man, I think it was Bill and Stacy that Jeff and I met, big super fans as well, and so many others over the years. And it was I can't, their names escape me right now, but I know there's a lot of people mourning right now, and this is getting super long. I didn't know if I was going to talk for 2 minutes or 20 minutes, and it looks like it's getting a lot closer to 20. But man, what a legacy. What a legacy. Um, so hey, thanks for letting me babble today. Um, Telling a little bit, a couple of my little Aussie stories. I've got a few others maybe I'll tell some other time. Got a pretty epic one from back in the 90s with my buddy Steve-O, who we went to a lot of shows together. My buddy Daryl, rest in peace, who we went to a lot of shows together. My buddy Norm, been to a bunch of shows with him. My buddy Dave, um, a lot of friends who traveled with me and went to these Aussie shows over the years. So, and thanks to you guys for, especially if you made it this far. Um, Again, I know I'm just rambling about Ozzy and about my time with him, but it was special. I miss him. I'm glad I made it to that last show. And even though I was pretty sure there'd never be another, now I know there'll never be another. And man, it hurts. So, thanks so much for stopping by. Remember, kindness is free. When you're out and about today, make sure you live it up some. Bye.